what happened that night at the threshing floor? Just take it on. What happened? At the church where I grew up, this story was kind of a Cinderella story of sorts. Ruth, the poor but beautiful young woman, searching for someone to take care of her. Boaz, the handsome Prince Charming, and Naomi, kind of the fairy godmother, making it all happen. In the church where I grew up, this was a very nice, chaste little story, because it would have to be, right? Because it's in the Bible. Okay. I don't know if anyone making those claims has read the Bible, but that was the argument. And then there's those scholars who point out that feet in the ancient Hebrew could be code for other lower extremities. There's the ones who point out that go to sleep can also be used to mean other things that have to do with sleep, and you catch my drift. So basically, it's quite possible that if Ruth 3 were a movie, we're talking more Bridgerton than Cinderella. If you don't know Bridgerton, the idea here is that the rating is more R than G. And I think this is an interesting thing, but to me, it's not the main point. I personally am more interested in why. Not what, but why. Because you see, there are people who read this story and say, good for Ruth. You go, girl. You take control of your life. Here we have a woman proposing marriage to a man, because the whole put your cloak over me thing was kind of understood in that time to be a ritual proposal situation. So yeah, she's proposing to a man. She is a poor woman, but she's not intimidated that he's rich. She is a migrant, and she is going to secure her citizenship. Go, Ruth. And then there's others who say that there's actually a less exciting undercurrent to all of that, right? She's a vulnerable woman. She's a poor migrant woman who may feel like she has no other choice if she's going to survive in a cruel and violent world. And so I think no matter what the rating of the movie is, it's important for us to wrestle with the fact that this is a story about survival. When Naomi sends Ruth to the threshing floor, she says that it's time to find her a home so that she's provided for. Survival. At the end of it, when Boaz gives her the grain, it may be a dowry of sorts, but it's also food for survival. And if we zoom out, the whole book of Ruth is kind of about survival. In the very first chapter, we find that Ruth and Naomi, who had been living in Moab, Naomi, an Israelite woman, Ruth, a Moabite woman, they're forced to migrate. You preached a great sermon on that, so I don't have to retell it. But that decision to migrate is based on survival as well. And what I find really interesting is that we can actually zoom out further than the text itself to the context in which it's written to understand that there was a big conversation happening about survival. You see, this story is said to take place during the time of the Judges. In other words, it would be like starting a story with, once upon a time, long, long ago. But it was probably written much, much later. After this big disaster called the Babylonian exile. When basically what happened was that a big empire came in and conquered the Israelite people, killed, deported, destroyed. They enacted a lot of violence upon them. And later, when the Israelite people were able to come back home, they had to figure out, who are we going to be as a people? There were other books written during this time who argued that who they should be is a group that focused on themselves. The books of Ezra and Nehemiah were also written at this time. I know I'm throwing a lot of biblical scholarship at you, but hang with me. Other people writing at the same time that Ruth was written were writing books that said, men, if you're married to a Moabite woman, you should divorce her. We need to focus on us. Make God's nation great again. Get rid of the immigrants. It's about us. And so by writing this story, the author of Ruth is saying, no, 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 no. What do you mean divorce your Moabite wives? Make them vulnerable like Ruth was? Don't you guys remember Ruth? Ruth, who would become one of the ancestors of King David. He was a really big deal in the Bible. The authors of this story are saying that our survival as a people isn't about being cruel to those who aren't like us. Our survival as a people isn't about attacking the most vulnerable. Instead, these authors are arguing, or this author, we don't know who wrote this, is arguing that survival is about caring for others more than you're required to. And that's something we can critique too. This is a book about women and how often are women asked to be self-sacrificing and to put others above themselves. So we can have that conversation. But I actually want to focus right now on what Boaz does in this story. Because you see, there was an ancient law that said that if a woman died, not if a woman died, if a woman's husband died, right, that a man would need to redeem her to make sure that she's provided for. And there was another law that talked about making sure she had kids, but they were kind of separate laws, and here they kind of get conflated together. But the basic idea we need to understand is that the nearest kinfolk was required to buy her land and give her some money. No one was required to marry anybody. That was extra. That was providing more than what was required. Boaz, throughout the story, has given Ruth more than what is required. When she was out gleaning grain, kind of like foraging for extras, he made sure there was extra there for her. And not just for her, but for Naomi, her mother-in-law. He even says, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. He knows exactly what he's doing, providing more than is required. And we see throughout this story, Ruth is loyal to Naomi when it's not required of her. Naomi is giving Ruth advice and helping her survive in a land that's foreign to her, even though that is not required of her. You see, this story, while it might be troubling for some of us because it shows the desperation that can come with a need to survive, it also shows to me that sometimes people do the right thing. Isn't that something we need to hear? When I watch the news, it feels like nobody's doing the right thing. It feels like everybody, at least the ones in power, are taking the position that it's all about us. It's all about our survival. Make America great again, right? We heard that. And yet here we see someone with power and privilege saying, I'm going to do what these women have always been doing for one another, and I'm going to care for them more than is required. That's the message. That's the message. And so when we're given the opportunity to choose self-protection, to choose being insular, or to choose reaching out, caring for the vulnerable, may we choose the latter. Amen.